Hello and welcome to World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farbach. On the ground in Kursk and Donetsk, Ukrainian forces rely on technology as much as strategy, with nearly 30,000 Starlink terminals from Poland helping keep troops and civilians connected. Now, with questions now rising about the future of this service and uncertainty over continued support from Poland's president, we're joined now by Ashton Cirillo, former sergeant with Ukraine's Defense Intelligence, to discuss what this means for the battlefield. Good to have you in the studio. Thanks for coming by.
It's great to be here, as always. To the Polish people and to TVP World, thanks for having our back since the full-scale invasion began and even before. We are really grateful for all of your support.
Well, appreciate you also for being here. So let's start with your expertise. You've been to the front lines. You've seen how this all goes down. Your first reaction, Starlink very much being disconnected. I mean, there's thousands of terminals. Poland has really contributed the lion's share of that. Tell us what happens if that goes. What impact does that have directly on the battlefield?
So the audience understands just how important the Polish connection to Starlink is. More than, or almost 2/3 of all Starlink terminals that have officially made its way into Ukraine have been provided by the Polish people, the Polish government. And to say that Starlink is anything but the backbone, the lifeblood of our communication systems would be a folly. Without Starlink and without the Polish support, things could collapse and collapse rapidly.
Okay. And I suppose it goes without saying that without Starlink, I mean, is there any kind of other alternative, or let's say logistically, how long would it take to have any sort of technological alternative in place?
One of the biggest issues is, are there other satellite sort of uplink responders? Yes. But there's nothing to the scale and cost of what Starlink provides for us across the entire front. So to try to put it together and do a patchwork just simply would not allow for the success that we've been having over the last 3.5 years in stopping the Russian invasion.
And I think it's also, as you put it, so key in terms of the impact on the battlefield, very much about also communication, command and control. I want to also ask your opinion here. I mean, recently, this is coming very fresh from the Financial Times, that the U.S. is offering basically any kind of European-led force with certain types of very key information, like command and control, like surveillance capacities. So first of all, if that does indeed come to pass, what kind of impact is that on the battlefield? How long will that kind of structure take to set up? And would it then ironically include Starlink again?
It would include Starlink. And let's speak for a second. I think the term used in the article was strategic enablers. And what the United States is offering is this umbrella of sort of intelligence and security packaging that will allow the European on-the-ground, boots-on-the-ground defense forces to have all the support necessary to be able to counter what Moscow's trying. And again, what is that based off of? Communications. How do we get the communications? Overwhelmingly through Starlink.
And also, I suppose the question is, I mean, if you're looking at this and this deployment, I mean, there's a lot of, let's say, distancing, right? They're providing a lot of the long-range capacities, the intelligence. I suppose the Americans want to keep out of harm's way here. But realistically, I mean, this would need some proximity to dangerous areas, would it not?
Well, the United States has potentially the best intelligence network overall across the globe. And President Trump has often talked about America first. And America first in this case is no U.S. boots on the ground. However, that doesn't mean American technology and tools wouldn't be utilized. And in today's world, the United States, through NATO, through the European Union, directly through Ukraine, and remember, there's nothing without Ukraine itself making decisions, that we would be able, from the United States, to support these defense initiatives to ensure that Russia is no longer able to threaten not just Ukraine, but Europe as a whole.
So if this does come to pass, and if this is integrated, first of all, how long would such an operation take? Well, all these different structures with the air defense, with the command and control, what are we looking at here? Is that a matter of weeks? Is that longer? What does that look like?
First, we need to make sure Putin understands that he needs to leave Ukraine. So until Putin understands that he has to sit down with President Zelensky and agree to a just peace, we can't count on some sort of European defense forces coming onto the ground. So it has to be step by step. What we're looking at now, what this article is discussing, is mid to long range planning. Nothing that's going to be taking place within the next weeks or months.
Okay. And just also curiosity, would this be something that the Europeans could fathom to do on their own, or do any of the Americans know this?
One thing we've seen with Europe, especially Poland, especially the Baltic states, especially the Nordic states, Sweden and elsewhere, Norway, people are contributing in ways we could have never fathomed 4 years ago before this full-scale invasion. Everything is possible. There's been questions over consensus within Europe, but as you well know, the European Union itself does not have a military. What we have are member states that are willing to stand by Ukraine, and I believe the member states that need to stand up and say, we will represent Europe, can come together.
And also, you're talking about a just peace. I mean, Ukraine not just holding itself and defending its own territory, but also some pretty impressive actions, what they did in the whole Kursk region. I mean, if we're looking back, I think it was about a year ago, we're looking, I think, at a brief time, 1,100 square kilometers inside actual Russian territory. Now, it's a small bridgehead. They've been pushed out about 10 kilometers or so that they have left. Give us your take at this point from military view. What have the, let's say, strategic implications of that been? Was it worth doing that? Did that give Ukraine any advantage? What's your assessment from that offensive?
I defer to the Supreme Commander-in-Chief, President Zelensky, to the Commander-in-Chief, Cirillo, and to our leadership in the SBU Alpha, our leadership in Defense Intelligence of Ukraine. These men and these women have come together and made the decisions that have allowed Pokrovsk, as an example, to still stay free. Would Pokrovsk be free had we not gone ahead and went into Kursk? Probably not. Would Shahs of Yar fallen much sooner than what's happened recently? Most likely it would have. The strategic defense of the East was reliant on the decision-making by President Zelensky and Commander-in-Chief Cirillo to enter Kursk and force Russia onto its back feet. Russia needs to be punched in the face, and the leadership in Ukraine understands that. There's no bowing to the Russian Federation when it comes to Ukrainian leadership.
Okay, and also Ukraine has struggled obviously on many fronts, and one of those is also critically civilian infrastructure, supporting and defending its own skies. Air defense has been key. If we're looking also at the recent strikes in Donetsk, for instance, I mean, that's being heavily pummeled, much of many other places, but 59 Russian drones overnight recently, 47 intercepted. So, I mean, I'm no expert here, but numbers here, that looks pretty good. I mean, is Ukraine in some way capable now of striking back, or let's say holding off Russia with this, or was this just chance?
It's not chance. We have the best military actively engaging in the world right now, even better than the Russian Federation. That said, we need more defense, air defense always. One of the areas that the United States had talked about supplying to this European-led command, the strategic enablers, was more air defense. This is a very specific topic that's always being discussed. We need air defense. We need as much as possible to stop the genocide of the Ukrainian civilians. We have a full-scale war going on, but we also have an active genocide of the Ukrainian civilian population being carried out by the Russians. Air defense is the key to stopping that genocide.
And I think also what's key here, I mean, I want to get into Donetsk a little bit further. It's that one area that Putin has said that he wants. He would say he'd freeze the conflict. And I just want to make the point again, and maybe illustrate to our viewers as well, why Donetsk in particular is so key. I mean, you have that whole defensive line, right? So tell us a bit again why this matters so much as well for Ukrainians.
It's the iron entrance to not just Ukraine, but to Europe. If you were to break through into Sloviansk, if you were to break through into Kramatorsk, which the Russians tried and attempted and briefly held in 2014, so we're talking 11 plus years now, then everything else will fall. It's known that this is the key strategic entry path for Russia to attack Europe and the rest of Ukraine. And for it not to have fallen in 11 plus years, that's why Putin is having to grovel to President Trump, having to grovel to his handlers in China to say, hey, please give me Donetsk Oblast, all of it, because we can't take it. Russia is now forced to its knees to ask for something that they cannot take on their own, and that is the key sign, not only as to how strongly we are defending Donetsk Oblast and that we will never lose Donetsk Oblast in full, but how badly Russia has now been neutered, that they're having to beg China and the United States to please try to get President Zelensky to hand them Donetsk.
I mean, there's so many factors that play here right now, and I don't want to speculate too much, but at this point, having heard now, as we said, the scoop from the United States, potentially about command and control support, looking at a visibly, let's say, more perturbed Donald Trump, getting angry at all this, he wants it resolved. Do you get a sense here at all that there's progress on the horizon here for Ukraine? How do you see it, at least tactically? And then give me a bit of your, let's say, political observations next few weeks, months.
From a tactical standpoint, for all intents and purposes, we have stymied Russia's summer advance. What Russia was hoping to accomplish and preparing for in March and April through their logistics channels and such have, for the most part, been stopped. Now, this is why we're looking at the political aspects, because Russia understands that what they were hoping to achieve this summer, they're not going to be able to. When it comes to the political side, President Trump, as he talks about, doesn't want to deal with a war that he was not in office for when the full-scale invasion began. And because of this, the United States is attempting every effort to try to wrap this up nicely. What I hope the United States and policymakers realize is it can be wrapped up nicely as soon as they understand that the dictator of Russia, Vladimir Putin, cannot be trusted, and that any decision-making has to exclude what Russia is asking for and simply focus on what's best for the United States, best for, of course, Ukraine and our partners in Europe.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, look, there's so much still at hand here, but of course, covering all this, as you said, command and control technology, that's really key no matter what happens in future. Look, thanks so much for coming in, sharing all that.
It's always a pleasure.
Pleasure here, Ashton Cirillo in the studio. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks here on TVP World, but stay tuned, much more coming up, so don't go away. Goodbye.